Alright, today we have a Mitsubishi Outlander. This is the non-PEV. So this is just the regular gasoline engine, and it is a 2014. And the customer complaint with this is that it jerks. Now, I did a diagnosis on this previously, and I did not drive it. What I found was that when it was idling, it kept cutting in and out, and I saw that coil number 1 and 3 were bad. So we changed coil number 1 and 3. Actually, we changed all 4 coils, and then that problem went away. But apparently that was not the original problem. They said, yeah, the car was doing that, it has stopped doing that, but what they were talking about is when they are driving, it jerks strongly and sometimes you lose power. I've tried to diagnose this thing. I was at the client's place for quite some time, didn't get much headway, and I told them, wait a minute, just give me the car, let me go to my workshop and stay with it and diagnose it. And they were going out for vacation, so it gave me a few days to figure out a good plan. So when I drove this thing, it doesn't do it all the time, but I managed to get it to act up. It jerks. It's very hard to describe. It feels to me like there's a disconnect between the engine and transmission. I am not so sure though. I'm not sure whether we're losing engine power and then it's reflecting on the transmission, or we're losing transmission power and the engine is fine. After much thinking, I decided to tackle it by putting a scope on both the engine and the transmission. So the game plan is I'm going to scope all the coils on channel 1, then all the injectors on channel 2, then the crank sensor on channel 3, then the transmission output speed sensor on channel 4. That way when we get the surge or the drop in power, we are going to see who is dropping out. Is the engine dropping out, then transferring that to the transmission, or is the transmission dropping out independent of the engine? So that is my game plan. And then the results I get from this first test are going to dictate my next moves. So let's go to the wiring diagram and I'll show you where I'm connected at. So here we are in the wiring diagram. This is a 2014. So the first thing we're going to do is to go to our circuit diagram, and it is the non-PHEV. This is the non-hybrid. So we're going to go to the ignition system, and I want to grab all my ignition coils on one channel. So here they are. We're going to grab it at connector A106, and that's at the fuse box. There is a white wire that comes in and it feeds all our ignition coils. So we're going to put a current clamp there on channel 1. Now let's go to the injectors. So let's go to the engine control system. This is the 4J engine, and we are going to go here to the injectors. So on the injectors, this power feed feeds more than the injectors. You can see it goes to this, it goes to this. I don't want any noise and other things in my channel, so we're going to go directly to the engine computer and we're going to look for the control wires on terminal 2, 3, 18 and 19, loop them in all on a current clamp, and we're going to take it from there. That'll give us a pure current for just the 4 injectors. So that will make me see whether I'm dropping injectors or dropping coils. Then we are going to come to our crank sensor right here, and on our crank sensor we're going to take the signal wire SGT on terminal 8 at the ECU. The reason why I'm taking the crank sensor is I'm going to do a math channel, and when I see the crank sensor drop, then I will know that it is the engine that has dropped. Okay, now let's go to the CVT. and then the CVT here with AS and G, that is auto stop and go, and that's us. We're going to look for the output shaft, and the output shaft is usually the secondary pulley speed sensor. So we're going to take this reading here on C130 terminal 36, and when I'm driving and the car cuts out, between the crank sensor and this, I will see who is cutting out. Is it the gearbox that's cutting out and the crank sensor is remaining normal, or is it the crank sensor that's cutting out, then the gear is cutting out altogether and transferring that shock onto the driver? And I hope this thing acts up, because it's quite intermittent. There are 2 days that I drove the car and it didn't do anything. So I really am hoping that I get some headway. So let's go and see where all our connections are on the vehicle. Right here in the front of the vehicle, that's our fuse box, that's our engine computer. This business of manufacturers putting the engine computer in a hot compartment is never the best thing. These computers tend to have shortened lifespan because of all the heat. I wish they would do like Toyota and transfer them to the cabin, although Toyota is doing the same thing on their later models. They're putting them here. They're saving on wiring, I guess. The copper amount that goes from here to here is short, but in so doing, you're left with the liability of a shorter lifespan of a module. Remember, heat, vibration, the two enemies of control modules. So here we have channel 1 on this current clamp, and that is the ignition coil feed wire over here. Channel 2 is this, and we have looped in all our 4 injector control wires onto the current clamp, and we're going to take it from there. Channel 3, that's our crank sensor. And by the way, do not, I repeat, do not back probe Mitsubishi connectors that look like this. You're going to damage both the connector and the ECU pin. Trust me, you want to use a piercing tool for this purpose. So that's here, ready to go. And then let's go in the car and show you where the CVT computer is. Now, in the vehicle, you'll need to take off the glove box and the knee panel to access this, and bolt the fuse box. And right back there, where I've back probed, that is the CVT computer. And I'm getting the secondary speed sensor from there. Now, this is a disease I see with a lot of techs. Be very careful when dealing with dash panels for your clients. You want to leave the car exactly as you found it. Organize your bolts. I use envelopes where I organize all my bolts. Write down on a piece of paper each panel that you take off in order, so that you can put everything together. It is very annoying when I see panels left out because of carelessness from mechanics. Mechanics, we need to do our jobs better. Do not damage your clients' cars because you're in a hurry. Take your time, do things right. So those are my connections. We're going to go to the picoscope, fire up all the channels, configure the scope, and then we go for a test drive. We will see what we see. If the engine, or if the car starts jerking, then I'll put this back on. If not, I'll still show you the captures of what I am seeing. So we're going on a favorite test road, which has the hills and the countryside. Oh, I haven't even gone very far, and I got a very strong jerk as I was driving up this hill. It's not even a hill, it's a slight ascent, and I've come to a stop, and that's my capture there, and I've saved it. And I'm not going to analyze it here because it's in the middle of the road. We're going to start the picoscope again, and we're going to drive, and I'll tell you what this thing is doing. It feels to me almost like there's a disconnect between the transmission and the... Oh, there's another one. Okay. Let me... Oh, I lost that one because I double tapped the... space bar. Let me go on the road again. It's a very strong jerk. It wasn't doing this at all in the last 2 days, so I am very happy that it's doing this now. I really will not go far with this because it's very strong. So let me try and get another one. Oh, there's another one. Good. Wow. So let me pause. Now, don't be excited with my injector drop off. That is a diesel, but there was a strong jerk. So let me save this and let me turn right here and go back to the workshop and analyze this capture. But this is very interesting. Okay, we're back in the workshop. Got 3 very good captures. 1 was a jerk, 2 was another jerk, and the 3rd one was something that felt like a misfire, a fluttering of some kind. In fact, that's what the owner told me. So this is a couple. So the wife tells me that when she drives, it jerks, but the husband told me that when it has happened to him, it felt like a misfire. So let's analyze this first waveform. And in order for us to see, first let's just look at these waveforms and you'll see. So these are the coils. These are the injectors. Ticking along fine. First of all, it does not look like we lose injectors anywhere. Okay. Even just by looking at it like this, we can clearly see that it doesn't look like we're losing injectors or coils. So let's analyze the crank waveform. So here's my crankshaft and here is my output shaft. In order for us to get a good analysis, let's go to Tools, Math Channels. We're going to get a math channel on C, and we're going to take its frequency. Let's edit that, and I'll show you the settings I'm using. So here I'm using a minimum of 500 Hertz and a maximum of 2000 Hertz. We can refine that as necessary. Finish that, and we turn it on. So let that process. Now, what I'll tell you is Pico takes quite a bit of processing power, so you need to give it time and you need to have a good laptop. So I'm going to come here, right click, and I'm going to hide my channel C so that we can only see that and look at this. Okay, so we have something here. Now let's go to this. Before we analyze this one, we're going to analyze it together with the output shaft. Now, our crankshaft had got missing teeth. That's why we have all these dropouts. So we're going to concentrate only on these smooth peaks up here. So let's go to the math channel again, and let's take the frequency of D. And for frequency of D, I'm doing it from 200 to 2000 Hertz. Let's finish that. Say OK. Let that calculate. While it's doing that, I'm going to right click here and we're going to hide channel D. Okay. So look at this. Now let me come here onto this channel and bring it forward. And I want us to focus here. So this is my jerk. So who is jerking first? Is the engine jerking or is the transmission jerking? So let's come here and check this out. what do you see? Remember, green is the engine and the tan there is the transmission. You can see that we lose power on the engine side and then we lose power on the transmission side. That is very, very cool. Amazing. How do you see this without a scope? There's no way you can. There's totally no way you can. So let me bring this down here. Clearly, it's the engine letting go, then the transmission is letting go. But if I come here and we put our cursor here, let's blow this up. And we're going to wait for the computer to catch up. Give it a second. Okay. So now we've caught up. So what you can see is we didn't lose anything. We did not lose coils and we did not lose injectors, but we dropped down on our crankshaft and consequently we dropped down on our output shaft. So we do have a dropout there. That looks more like a misfire to me. And it is exactly one cycle. See that? Then we recovered here. And then as we recovered, you can see we transfer power. Remember, it takes time for the power to go from the engine to the tranny. So we transfer power from the engine, then the tranny picks up that power, and then we go back up. So this one, we can see it's the engine side. Let us go to the next one. Now remember, it needs to be repeatable for it to be scientific. So here is where I came to a slowdown. I decelerated to come to a stop. So ignore this. This is not missing injectors. That's just decel. So we're going to do the same thing. Since our math channels are created, we're just going to go both of them, turn them on, and then come here and turn channel C and D off. Wait for our math channels to populate. And there we go. Now watch this. See this? This is what I felt, a very strong jerk. And as you can see on the output shaft, we dropped RPM. But again, who is dropping first? Is it the engine or the tranny? And again, you can see clearly we are losing power on the engine. See? Then we are losing power on the transmission. Guys, this is not a transmission issue. And to be honest, it does feel like a transmission issue, but it's not a transmission issue at all. This is an engine issue. We are definitely dropping power on our crankshaft first, then on our tranny. Now let's go to where I felt a flutter, which was on the third capture. So I called it multi-jerk. Let's do the same thing. We come here, we hide channel C and D, and then come here, take our math channel, and we turn on the frequencies. And let's analyze that. And this is where I felt it. Exactly like the output shaft has picked it up. Look at this kind of ringing. This jerk. This is what happened when I was driving. So let's zoom in there. Now this one is interesting because we are fluttering like this, but we do not have any corresponding issues with our engine. amazing. We have two separate problems with this vehicle. We do have a CVT issue. This CVT seems like it's slipping because we are not dropping that down here corresponding to the crankshaft. Nice captures. Let's look at our spark plugs, and I want to see what type of spark plugs we have here. Oh gosh, too tight. All right, we have a lot of oil on the plugs. And this is DILKR6D 11G. Are these plugs genuine? I don't know. The iridium tip looks kind of okay. But look at this. That's a lot of oil on the plug. Now, where is it coming from? Because this is not good. Now, this car is not smoking, neither is it consuming oil. So this is pretty strange. So let's check on the type of plug that this car uses, and then we'll decide what to do. Alright, I've confirmed these plugs are actually originals, but they are the original plugs that came with the engine from the time the car was bought. So the plugs have never been changed. We are at 176,000 kilometers on the clock, and these are supposed to be changed at 90,000 kilometers, so they are way overdue. But all that is just speculation. As you know, on this channel we go by evidence. I still want to see that the crankshaft dropout is due to the plugs. So we're going to put the plugs back in the same places where they came from. I do not like the amount of oil that's on this particular plug. This is on the number 2, and inside we have oil also. If you see that, we have oil that is at the base of the spark plug well, but it doesn't look like the spark plug seal is leaking at the top here. This top is quite dry, it's bone dry. So I don't know if that oil was in the cylinder and I pulled it out when I was pulling the plug. If it's from the cylinder, that's bad. It's worse than if it's a spark plug tube. But the rest of the others are clean. Like this one is clean. In fact, you can see that I can focus in there very well. that one is oily. Then this one is clean, and the last one there, the pipe is in the way, but that's clean. So let's put the plugs back. Then we're going to isolate, is this a single cylinder misfire or is it a dual cylinder misfire whenever we drop out on our crankshaft. So we are going to remove the coil channel, which is the coil current clamp, and then we're going to put, because we know we're not losing any coils, so we're going to put a channel on coil number 1 trigger right on this one, and then we're still going to maintain our crankshaft and then see if we are going to drop out the same cylinder each time. This thing is very intermittent, but today it gave me quite a few bumps, so I hope it'll do it again. So let's do that, and then if we find that it's on one cylinder, what we're going to do is just swap plugs and then see if it follows the plug. If it follows the plug, we are going to be good. We'll just change all the plugs, and we know that that will solve our issue here, because as I said, coils are all new and they're all OEM. So let's do that. We have replaced on channel 1 trigger number 1 instead of the coil currents. Now let's go on a test drive, and it's nighttime already. See, it's totally dark. So let me just go on a test drive and I'll capture a few bumps, and then we will discuss after I come back. Well, interesting, I went for another test drive and now I have an idle misfire, kind of a fish bite. So you should watch that tack. See that? There is another one. There's another one. Beautiful. So confirmed that we have an engine issue, but I suspect we also still have a transmission issue. Let's look at our captures. I have a couple of these misfires, and then I also have a flutter that I picked up again. Let's look at that. All right, we're back after some dinner. By the way, I'm at home, so we can work late, no problem. We're going to filter channel A. Okay. And then I want to filter the crankshaft channel just to get rid of these hairs here, which means we don't put a very aggressive filter on it. So let's go to channel C, activate filtering, but you see this? It turns it almost into a different type of signal. We're going to go to 40 kilohertz. And that's not good. And we're going to do the same with this. How do I know these numbers? By playing around with the scope for a long time. Some of these numbers that stick out in my head. You should always play around with your scope, and the key is to play around on cars that are working, not cars that are broken. Okay, so that's nice filtered. Now let's turn our math channels on. We can first just remove C and D from view, and then go to our math channels and turn C and D frequencies on. Beautiful, that's what it is. Now let's bring this up, and here is our hesitation, our bump, and let's zoom in. Wait for the processing to complete, and you can clearly see crankshaft misfired, then it transferred that anomaly to the output shaft. So this is a gear response to the crankshaft. Let's see what coil this is. Remember, I'm triggered on coil number 1. Firing order is 1, 3, 4, 2. We can see the crankshaft accelerate each time we fire. So 1, 3, 4, 2. So 2 misfired over here. Very good. Now let's open the file where there was a flutter. So you know there's a misfire on 2. Let's go to, actually, let's open the file where we had an idle misfire. Remember when I was telling you it was misfiring at idle? And we're going to do the same here. Activate filtering there. We activate filtering on C, and we put that at 40. Let's take away C and D from view, and let's turn on our math channel. And I created a special one for idle where the frequency is much lower, from 0 to 500 hertz. And here we can clearly see we have some good misfire. So this is what we are seeing as the car was running. So it was doing like that, okay? And let's go here where we have a couple of misfire sections. I'm going to zoom in here. Those are good misfire sections. Bring our coil firing down. So 1, 3, 4, 2 again misfired. Let's go here. 1, 3, 4, 2. So this is consistently number 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2. So now we know that we are misfiring on number 2. So we have one issue is that we are misfiring on the engine. Now we need to find out, is this a coil, injector, or spark plug? So what I want to do is go to my engine, and I'm going to swap spark plug number 2 with 1. And then we'll take this capture again. So keep that in mind. But now let's look at the flutter. So we fluttered here. And I was going uphill when we experienced this flutter here. So you can see when I'm going uphill, we have more interference here because our spark is basically stronger. So we filter 1, then we filter C at 40. We filter D again at 40. Right click here, hide D and C from view, and then we turn on our frequencies for C and D. And check this out. So this is D. Look at this. So this is a flutter of the output shaft, then smooth, then flutters again here, then it flutters again here. Now I want you to pay attention to this. Look at the crankshaft. Nothing is happening to the crankshaft that is anywhere near what is happening to the output shaft. This is an output shaft problem, basically a transmission problem. So this car has got two problems. One is in the tranny and the second one is in the engine. Let's solve them one by one. Let's start with the engine. Let's go swap spark plugs between cylinder 1 and 2, and then we retest and see if it follows the plug. Alright, I didn't even have to go on a test drive. I started it and it started misfiring right away a few times, and I've saved that capture. So let's process this real quick. I'm going to hide DNC, tools, math channels, and we're going to take the frequency of C only. There we go. So we got 3 misfires. 1, 2, 3, actually 4. Last time we were on cylinder 2. Let's see if we have moved cylinders. And just preliminary check, we have moved to cylinder number 1. So this is a misfire on 1, 3, 4, 2. Let's go for a different one. Now I changed my scaling here. Let me just add this so it's easier on the eyes. Yeah, that's better. Bring it up here. Let's go to the second misfire here. And again, we are misfiring on cylinder number 1. Okay. Let's go on the third one. Here. Again, cylinder number 1. And let's check the fourth time. And it's cylinder number 1. So at this point in time, we need to stop completely because we have bad plugs. So tomorrow morning, we're going to call up the dealer, get some fresh new plugs delivered to us. OEM only. I do not do aftermarket plugs. Put them in, and then we are going to figure out what's up with our tranny. We do have a transmission issue, but we do not layer problems on top of each other. So let's deal with this one first, and then we will deal with the transmission. All right, these were hard to get. There were only 4 pieces available in the entire country from the dealer. 2 pieces were in Nairobi, 1 piece was in Kisumu, 1 piece was in Mombasa. So we had to wait for them to come. So this is 2 days later. So thank you to the dealer. And these are the OEM spark plugs. And that's what we have. So they are NGKs, iridiums, and that's your part number. Now, let me warn you, do not put aftermarket plugs in these JB1 engines and also the Outlander hybrids. You'll be sorry. Aftermarket plugs don't do well in this engine. Get the OEM. This is a variable lift engine and they do not like aftermarket plugs. So let's throw this in the engine and then we take our readings again. The first one to eliminate our misfire at idle, and then we see if our gear is going to still flutter. That's what I'm interested in. Alright, the plugs have been changed. Let's start the car. It is cold. And look at that. That is beautiful. Let me put off the auto start stop. That's nice. Look at the RPM. Now we are constant. No fluttering. And let me put it in gear. So that's reverse. This is where it was misfiring slightly, and now it's holding. And if I torque it up a bit, That's brilliant. So we fixed one problem, but as we saw, these are two independent problems. I am not convinced that spark plugs would cause the transmission to shudder the way it's doing. We have a shuddering transmission. Now, there are many components in the CVT. There's a torque converter, there is the pump, there is the primary pulley, and there's a secondary pulley. Then there are the clutches in between those. Any of those could have a failure, but we need to narrow it down to which side. Are we losing on the secondary side, or are we shuddering on the primary side? And if you're on the primary side, is it the torque converter, or is it the CVT belt, or is it the clutches, things like that? So I slept on this, and I have a strategy that I want to employ. So as this car warms up, let's go to the computer, and I'm going to show you what I will be testing. Now, before I go to the wiring diagram, let me just quickly give you an overview of the CVT. So this animation can be found here on Car Info 3D YouTube channel, and that is the video. I'm going to just play a very short section of it, but let me just describe what we have here. So we have a torque converter, and the torque converter has got the side that's coupled to the engine, which is the whole case, and then the side that is coupled to the transmission inside, which is the turbine side. The two are not coupled together. So to transfer torque from the engine to the turbine side, you use the fluid inside the torque converter. Now, the torque converter turbine side can be locked with the engine side using the torque converter clutch, and that clutch sometimes also brings issues. So this turbine side is connected directly to the input shaft, which is connected to the primary pulley here, and the primary pulley also has some clutches here. So the primary pulley can turn independent of the turbine itself, depending on the clutch actuation here. So this primary pulley turns according to the turbine speed, and then it turns the secondary pulley. Now the secondary pulley is the one that is variable, and it is the one that connects to the drivetrain. When we were taking our readings before, we were taking it on the secondary pulley over here. Now the primary pulley and the secondary pulley are connected with that belt, and this belt is the one that transfers power from primary to secondary. So you can see that there can be potential places of failure here. First, we can have a failure in the torque converter itself. Second, we can have a failure in these clutches. Third, we can have a failure in this pulley belt system, which means a variator here that varies in and out, or the belt itself can be slipping. Fourth, we can have a problem with the secondary pulley just not grabbing the belt well enough. So how do we eliminate? We're going to take the speed sensors respectively. So we're going to take the secondary speed sensor, the primary speed sensor, the turbine speed sensor, and then we're also going to add a fourth channel, which is the oil pressure sensor inside the CVT. Then we're going to go on a test drive and see where our shudder is coming from. Now here is my theory. If we are slipping on the secondary, we will shudder only on the secondary here, which means this belt, when it's being driven, it's going to slip while pulling the secondary. So if you have a belt problem, we'll see a shudder only on the secondary, we'll see no shudder on the primary and the turbine. If we are shuddering on the primary, as in there's something wrong with these clutch packs, then we are going to see a shudder on the primary and the secondary, because the primary transfers its load to the secondary. So if there's a shudder on the primary, we're also going to see the same shudder on the secondary, but we're not going to see a shudder on the turbine. But if we have a turbine issue, we're going to see a shudder starting from the primary and everything will shudder. So primary, turbine will shudder, primary will shudder, and secondary will shudder. And then the reason why I'm taking the oil pressure sensor is if we see a shudder either on the primary or secondary, we want to see, are we losing oil pressure or are we maintaining oil pressure? If we are losing oil pressure, then we have a pump issue that is not supplying enough pressure for our clutches. If we are not losing pressure, then we just have a clutch issue. Okay, hope that's clear. Let's go to the wiring diagram now. So on channel 1, we're going to pick the turbine speed sensor here. On channel 2, we're going to pick the primary pulley speed sensor. Channel 3, we're going to pick the secondary pulley speed sensor. And channel 4, we are going to pick the secondary pressure sensor here. Those are our connections, and I've already connected them. And by the way, that noise you're hearing is the AC. It's very hot today. So those are my 4 channels over there, and we are going to now go to the Pico and go for a test drive and see where our shudder is coming from. Now this car is still warming up, so let me drive it. I have an errand to do, so I'm going to drive it for around 15 minutes. Usually transmission problems show up when the transmission is nice and hot. Let me get the transmission up to temperature and then we will proceed. Now I've just gone on a 15-minute test drive and I was just doing some observation, not looking at any data or anything, just observing. And what I found out was you can duplicate this easily when you're on light throttle coming from a dead stop going uphill. That's the key, light throttle from dead stop going uphill. If you lay in it hard, or if you are going on a straight gradient, you don't feel much. So our Pico is running. There's a hill that is on my right over here. So what I want to do is I go drive and let's start. So right now it's driving well. I'm not feeling anything on. By the way, that other symptom of the bump, that's completely gone. So that was being caused by the spark plugs. That's fixed, but the shudder is still there. So we have a turning in here, and this turning has kind of a steep gradient. So we have to come to a stop because of the traffic. And let's go in here. Oh, it's going straight. There's a bump here. Now I didn't feel anything over there. There's another roundabout in front, so let me go on that roundabout. Alright, we're back in the workshop. Now, let's open a few of these. Let's start with this one. So the first thing I've noticed is we are not losing our pressure, secondary pressure. So that tells me our pump is good and doesn't look like we have dropouts here so far. But we need to see frequency. So we're going to go to match channels, and I've already configured the frequency channels for this. I'm going to turn on frequency A, B, and C, and I'm going to hide the channels themselves from view. And there it is. And this is exactly what I was feeling. It does it like once, and then it doesn't do it again. Usually from a dead stop going uphill. Now, right off the bat, I need to there's some things which we can tell from here. Our pulleys appear to be good. The reason I'm saying that is, if you look at this is the primary pulley and this is the turbine. First of all, they're mirroring each other. If you bring this here, you'll see that it's a mirror. That tells me that the clutch between the turbine and the primary pulley is good. Second, you'll see that when the primary pulley starts up, we start up in high frequency and then we kind of stabilize here. We maintain frequency while the secondary pulley is going up. So this tells me that the variator is working. And here, when we start going into the higher gear ratios, we start dropping the primary pulley, but we're still raising the secondary pulley. Guys, this CVT, mechanically, it's doing what it's supposed to do. But this right here, this is our shimmy. And look where it's coming from. This shimmy is actually originating from the torque converter itself, because that's a turbine, and then it's being transferred to the primary and consequently to the secondary. And if you see this, all these are the same frequency. Let me try and overlay them on top of each other. You can see that's the same frequency, which means it's coming from the source. So we have a torque converter issue here. But why is it only this section and then it stops? Well, there's a bit of it here as it's going down. So what's happening? We could be having an issue with the lockup solenoid or the lockup clutches. This may be that the lockup is being engaged, and when it's engaging, it is shuddering like this. In order for us to kind of have an idea, let's see what frequency we are at. On the secondary. So when we start pulsating like that, we are around 536 hertz. So let's keep that in mind, and let's open another one. And I'll tell you why I am taking the frequency at that point. So again, turn on our math channels. Turn off our main channels. And let's separate. Again, we can see it's a mirror image. The primary is a mirror image of the turbine, which means it's just following what the turbine is doing. So all this shudder is coming from the turbine. Now let's see. We start a bit of shudder here and then a major shudder here. Let's see what frequency we are at here and what frequency we are at right here. So let's bring this down. So right here we are at 581, and here we are at 642. These frequencies are closely related, and the pressure is remaining the same. Guys, what I think is the torque converter is engaging lockup, and that process of engaging lockup is the one that's producing this shudder. Now, we should not see this when we lay in it, because the torque converter hardly locks up when you lay in it unless you go on very high RPM. So let's now go to the one that I laid on the accelerator, which is this one. Same thing, math channel. And we turn off our main channels. Okay, and just as I suspected, look at this. First of all, notice the primary and the secondary, again mirror image. This tells me that the primary and secondary are not slipping. There's no slippage anywhere. This CVT is excellent in integrity. Our problem is inside that torque converter clutch. And look at this. We've got a nice clean buildup of frequency. And look at this. When we go down here, we're changing ratios and we are still building up speed nicely. This is pointing to a torque converter clutch issue. So basically I'm done by looking at this capture. By the theory of operation of a torque converter, this vehicle needs a new torque converter. But usually when these torque converters go bad, it's usually because they lock up too early, and that dragging force ends up spoiling those clutches. So we may need to see whether we have software update for that. But the other thing is, to be 100% confident, what I want to do now is to take just the primary here and the two converter lockup solenoids and then go for another test drive and see what they do. Alright guys, it's really hot here. I've turned on the AC again, but let me just quickly show you what we have. Now we're going to leave the turbine speed sensor on channel A, and then we're going to take this lockup detection solenoid valve and the lockup solenoid valve on channel B and C, and then we'll go on a test drive. Now I want this car to cool down a bit because I've noticed that that shudder is there when it's not too hot, when it's not too cold, so somewhere on moderate temperature. So let me let the car cool down maybe an hour or two, and then we are going to go for this test drive. All right, we are connected. Let's start the car. And first, let's see what our voltages are. So let me pause. So we have a square wave control on the lockup solenoid valve, and then lockup selection is at system voltage. So my guess is this will go down maybe when it's locked up. I don't know. We will see. So let's start this, and let me put this at 50 volts so that I can save some screen real estate, so that we can see what happens with our lockup selection. Okay, I think we're good to go. Let's go for a test drive. Now, something very interesting that I've noticed, let me show you my selector. Put it in park. Now when I'm in park, our lockup duty is on and our lockup selection is high. When I put it in gear like that, our lockup duty goes off and our lockup selection goes low. So does that mean that our lockup is high Maybe. I think that's what it is. So let me put it in gear. Okay, so now we're in drive. I think that's what it is. Interesting. So let's go. Right, let's take a right here. There's a bit of an incline here, and this is where I could always duplicate it. There we go. All right, let's analyze this. So we initiated lockup here. First, let's look at this lockup frequency. Frequency is the same. What about the duty cycle though? All right, so the duty cycle kind of almost remains the same as well. So here we go to about 34 and we hold it constant. All right, let's turn on the frequency of channel A and we look at how the torque converter turbine responds. And there we have our shudder right here. Now, every time I got this, I did it again. It's when we go from no lockup to lockup, and then it takes a bit of time. Of course, you don't lock up immediately. It takes a bit of time for those clutches to compress. So this would make sense. I tried duplicating it when the duty cycle here remained high. I could not. So this is definitely a torque converter lockup shudder. And yeah, these cars, they initiate the torque converter lockup very, very early. This is less than 20 kilometers per hour. And that's when they begin their duty cycle here. So it's the same thing that plagued the Toyotas in is it 2014, 2015? Actually, almost the same period as this. This is a 2014, where manufacturers tried to lock up as early as possible, of course, to save on fuel, to increase fuel economy. But what that ends up doing is putting a high load on those torque converter clutches, and they end up damaging the torque converter. This is a software issue. I'll have to see whether there's an update for this, but the torque converter is already damaged. Once you see that, there is nothing you can do. So, unfortunate. I will have to relay this to the client. Although the good news is there's nothing wrong with the CVT itself. Once we get a replacement torque converter, this should be fine, and possibly a software update. If there's no software update, then I will just let her know that this problem will occur again with the same software if we just put a new converter in. That to me is not something that is viable. I wish they would maintain the same lockup formula they used in the old automatic transmissions, where you lock up at a healthy speed. That way you don't put pressure on the clutches. But I don't build them, I don't break them, I only diagnose them. And that's it for this one. Bad torque converter clutch due to early lockup. 2014 Mitsubishi Outlander. Really problematic CVTs in these ones, but in this case, the CVT itself is fine. It's just a torque converter that is bad. That's it. Until next time.